I'd like to give you kind of a general overview of the IONS channeling research program, and then highlighting the physical mediumship work that, thanks to Anna Morelli and the Marco Morelli Foundation, we have been grateful to be working on. And so you'll notice as I go through the many studies that we've done on channeling, I'm going to be going through them very quickly, and hopefully we'll have more time at the end for questions, and I can direct you to the many resources that you can delve more deeply into about this. So, if you heard my academic bio, you'd hear, I went to UC Berkeley, I got my naturopathic doctorate, I was in private practice, I then got into research, got my master's in clinical research and 2 postdoctoral research fellowships, focused on complementary and alternative medicine, stress, etc. But what you don't normally hear in my academic bio is that I also come from a long line of trance channelers. My mother is a trance channeler, my uncle, my grandmother, this is my mother's family here. Every member of my mother's family has some type of channeling experience, phenomenon, and capacity. And I went to my first, what they called meetings, when I was 10 years old. And my uncle was in full trance, and there were like 40 people in the room. And so that's kind of how I was raised. It was now, in hindsight, it was a very spiritualist type worldview that I was raised in, but I kept it very hidden. And so I didn't quite realize that. Anyway, through a very synchronistic chain of events, I ended up at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where I'm so grateful now to be the director of research. And for those of you who don't know, IONS, which is the acronym, was founded by Edgar Mitchell, who is an Apollo 14 astronaut. And he was the 6th person to walk on the moon. So he went to the moon, he did his job on the moon, collected his samples, and then he was on his way home in his capsule, and the capsule was twirling around and around. He was seeing sun, stars, earth, and he just went into a complete transcendent state where he dissolved. He felt part of the universe was part of him. So as an astronaut engineer, this was completely foreign to him. And he went back to Earth and he said, I want to know what the heck's going on with this. And he founded IONS 50 years ago now, which is pretty incredible. So at IONS, our guiding hypothesis is that everything is interconnected, and that embodying that awareness reveals information energy not limited by space and time, which in turn can profoundly amplify transformation, innovation, and well-being. And so today we're really going to hone in on this, revealing information and energy not limited by space and time. And so, I use the word channeling in a very specific way that may be different than how you might think of it. So I want to just start with what I mean by channeling, which is this process of revealing information, energy not limited by our conventional notions of space and time, that can appear receptive and also expressive. And these are, I'm proposing that this channeling phenomenon is an innate capacity, meaning that all humans have the capacity to channel in one way or another, and that it shows up on a diverse spectrum in each of us. So on one hand, you might have gut hunches or intuitive hits that just about everybody could say they've experienced, and on the other side, you have mediumship, mental mediumship, trance channeling, etc., however you want to define those experiences. And so when I came to IONS with my personal background and my research background, I said, hey, I want to create a program that really asks 6 different research questions, important questions about channeling, like how common is it? What do we already know? What are its characteristics? Is channeling real, in quotes? How does it work? what makes a channeler, and is the content useful? So I'm going to just walk through very quickly what we've learned about some of these research questions. So I've been working on this at IONS for about 9 years now. So in terms of how common channeling is, these experiences are ubiquitous around the world. And this is a graph that just shows you the numerous studies that have been done worldwide on different phenomenon like contact with the dead, apparitions, ghosts, clairvoyance, telepathy, side dreams, precognition, etc. And you see, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but you know, it ranges from like 5% all the way up to 70%. And we did a study with about 900 people. And this is just highlighting 3 specific pieces: in touch with someone far away, seeing at a distance, and contact with the dead. If you look at the contact with the dead numbers, this is our study on the left here, and the numbers are incredibly high. So if you look at this in context in terms of medical literature, you know, rare is like 0.001%, and these is like between 40 and 70%. We're seeing people who are having these experiences. So this is incredibly common. In terms of what are its characteristics, I mentioned about this innate capacity and the spectrum of experiences. And so what we're really looking at is how each individual's specific expression is of this intuitive capacity, noetic wisdom, channeling, whatever you want to call it. And so I know terms are an issue, but of course we coined another term called the noetic signature, which represents each person's individual expression of how they tap into beyond their 5 senses. And we've done a number of studies now developing what we call the noetic signature inventory. First, we asked about 500 people to write out how they experience channeling. Then we created our first version of the inventory, which had 350 questions. We narrowed it down to 175. We gave that to over 1,000 people, refined that with statistics to our final version, which has about 44 items, and that's available on our website. And we used statistics to tease apart the kind of main characteristics for how people express their noetic wisdom, if you will. And so just very quickly to go through the 12, one is kind of general intuition that shows up through emotions, through feeling of the body and knowing it mentally. So these are people who say, I just know that it's true. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the ferry boat honking at some motorboat that's not getting out of the way. You may not be able to hear that, but I do. Embodied sensations. I get this all the time. I get goosebumps if I feel something that's a truth. Physical sensations from other people. This is, you know, feeling other people's actual like pain or headaches or whatever. Inner knowing through touch. This is historically known as psychometry. We have inner voice, clairaudience. And then, of course, what I think your group's most interested in, apparent communication with non-physical beings. So this is going to encompass ADCs, mediumship, physical mediumship, etc. Visualizing to access or affect. This is like psychokinesis and also clairvoyance and remote viewing. Healing, telepathy, knowing through dreams. And these are the 12. So people say, well, I have something that's a little bit different. That may be true, but in general, these 12 expressions of channeling were what described most of the data in our mostly Western sample. So ideally, we'd love to do this in different samples around the world. So we have a number, we have 4 papers now that we've written on this work, and those are open access available, except the last one, which is still being reviewed. And if you want to learn more, we have this public version of the Noetic signature, and researchers can use it as well if people are interested in adding it to their studies. And we just finished a recent analysis that took those 12 and then asked, hey, are there any groupings or patterns amongst the 12? And we saw that, in fact, they did kind of load in a very logical way. Just to give you an example, physical sensations from other people, embodied sensations, and inner knowing through touch, all loaded on what we're calling the super factors of embodied wisdom. We also looked at patterns across people. And so in general, we saw that there were some people who were high across the board, some people who were low across the board, and then people in the middle. And what distinguished those people in the middle was whether they could perceive the future and dreams, that whether they received information from their dreams was actually the strongest predictor of this sort of noetic signature type. Anyway, that's our noetic signature work and exploring the characteristics. We really want to highlight that there's no one way better than another way, that these are innate capacities, and how do we use this tool to really engage in conversation and transparency and to support people to nurture and explore their own way of intuition and channeling. So a little bit on what makes a channel a channel. So again, you know, I'm really holding this idea that we all have this in some way. And there have been studies that I think are supporting that. But besides that, there's some specific characteristics that we see from people who have spontaneous experiences, but also who do better in the laboratory. And one of them is meditation or some sort of focused attention training. And this makes sense to me, and we can talk about this in the Q&A if you want to dive into this a little bit more deeply. We also have altered states of consciousness. So however you get to the altered state of consciousness can really vary, you know, whether it's music or drumming or being in nature or psychedelics or who knows what. But being in an altered state supports us to go beyond our traditional 5 senses. And then I had a slide in here that around belief. Actually, meditation and belief. Belief is one of the strongest predictors of having these experiences. So just believing in channeling and believing that you can do it is one of the strongest predictors that you will have channeling experiences, which I think is pretty cool. We've also explored this idea that it runs in families, this genetic piece. Obviously, I have a personal interest in that because I've experienced that myself. We did a small pilot study, and we found a really interesting piece of chromosome 7, this TNRC 18, but it was actually on the non-coding region, which is a region that is believed to modulate the protein creating parts of our DNA. And this was when we looked at 14 people who were vetted through multiple hoops of having psychic ability and also family history, and people who did not. So this is highly expressed throughout the brain, has multiple functions. But what's most fascinating is that it's present in 90% of the people in these very large genomic databases. So this pilot study actually supported the idea that this is present in everybody in some capacity. And so we're really excited to keep going forward with this research. The other project around this is a collaboration with Harvard and Columbia looking at structural neuroimaging. So what's going on with the volume of different brain areas and how that relates to people's self-reported channeling abilities. So we gave people a questionnaire of 12 items, and then we looked at their neuroimaging scans, and those 12 items, we just said, hey, have you ever experienced this or not? So it was like a yes, no. So the people who said yes, they had larger hippocampi, which is in the temporal lobe. Then, hippocampus. Then we also asked people if they said yes to one of those items. We said, well, how often have you actually experienced that? And people who had higher scores on that also had larger hippocampi and larger amygdala, which is kind of the emotional center. Hippocampus is associated with memory. Again, I'm going through this very quickly. Then we looked at each 12 of the experiences individually, and you see here contact with the dead. This was significant almost across the board for the 12 different brain regions that we looked at, which is pretty incredible to me. And we also see that there were numerous phenomenon related, oh, you can't see my cursor, with the hippocampus and amygdala. So again, this is a pilot study. These results are very, very interesting to us. And for me, it's about this whole nature nurture. I know that there definitely is a nurture aspect to it because I've talked to so many people who are either teachers or who have taken trainings who have increased their skill in being able to do this. And yet, is there some type of nature aspect of us coming into the world with a propensity to specific types? So I think that's really interesting and curious. And I kind of relate that to, we all have the capacity, but we may have propensity to certain abilities on those different types. And with training, we can improve our skill. But just because I can, dribble a basketball and shoot a hoop doesn't mean I'm going to be a professional basketball player, right? So I can take a class and learn how to do mental mediumship or learn how to do things, but I may not be the most skilled at it. Anyway, that's an interesting research process as well. So let's see here where I'm at with okay, great. So that was a very, very, very fast overview of some of the questions that we're looking at in the IONS channeling research program. And so what I want to do now is dive into the physical mediumship piece, which I know you're all very interested in. So just deep gratitude to Anna Morelli and the Marco Project, which is funding and supporting this work in multiple different ways. And you can also, this is the Marco Project website, which is a wonderful website and has a lot of resources on it. And so I invite you to check that out to learn more about it. So, I showed you this spectrum. Physical mediumship is even further out in the extremes in terms of its rarity compared to these other channeling experiences. And so it is a rare but global phenomenon. And it encompasses a diverse range of experiences. And I won't read all of these out to you, but just to highlight a few, we have ectoplasm, we have voice phenomenon, table-associated phenomenon, and independent writing, typing, precipitated art, etc. So how many of you, I don't know if we can do a show of hands easily, but how many of you have been to a physical mediumship seance. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of hands there. So most of you may have experienced some of these directly. So when Anna first approached us to do this, I had never been to a physical mediumship seance, even though I'd been to probably thousands of trance channeling sittings. So what we often do when we're looking at a new topic is to get a lay of the land. So one of the first things we did is bring together various researchers and scholars and experiencers in the field, and we had this physical mediumship work group in 2022. It was represented scientists and scholars from 7 countries talking about the state of the science, talking about what should a research program look like. We had 4 sessions, multiple presentations, and some of the white papers from that are actually getting published in the Journal for the Society of Psychical Research, which is really great. And the videos, they've been cleaned up and edited, but they are available freely on the IONS YouTube channel. So this is a great resource for people to start learning about this. We also hosted a free live webinar called Connect IONS Live. I believe we had, like almost 900 people registered for that. So the interest in this topic is quite exciting. And we had some people from our science work group who, we had a panel and we had a lot of question answers about physical mediumship. So I had mentioned that I hadn't been to an actual physical mediumship seance. So the next step, Anna said, you just need to go. So I went to the International Physical Mediumship in Victorian Times conference at Lilydale, and I see Sue Barnes here, who was pivotal in making that happen. I think it was the first physical mediumship conference at Lilydale in over 100 years or something like that. And I was able to see 6 seances in a row that week, which was quite profound. And then in September, I went to Santa Fe and saw David Thompson. And so these are the phenomenon that I personally experienced at those seances. Numerous apports, direct voice through trumpet, manipulating objects, numerous different types of object, various manifestations of ectoplasm, physical touches. At one point, my chair was like physically tipped back. Witnessed transfiguration. Other participants received healings, manifestation of smells, evidential information. Most of those seances were done in a dark setting, but some were done in blue light as well. I think for me, the most profound experience that I witnessed was this spearhead apport. This is as long as my hand, so I don't know, 5-6 inches. And this was in a completely lighted room after the seance. And I was standing right next to the physical medium when this was coming out of his mouth. So that was quite remarkable for me to witness. So, I've always been very positive about these phenomenon, but I think witnessing them firsthand was really remarkable for me. So I was grateful for that. And it really but it inspired my ideas about, well, how do we actually study this? And came away with some different ideas about how to study this, because I'm sure many of you know, channeling in general, there are so many taboos about studying it. But when you take physical mediumship, that's like ramped up times 1,000. Like there's just such intense, almost violent skepticism against these phenomenon that it makes it really challenging to embark on this path of evaluating it. So the first kind of set of studies was around phenomenology. So how do people actually experience the seances? What do they witness? How does it affect them? What are their beliefs before they went in? What are their beliefs after they went in? And that's a study that we're doing right now, and I'll share a little bit more about that. The other phenomenological idea I had was about doing a qualitative study of the physical mediums themselves. Actually, in-depth interviews with their experience, their development, their process, and where they're at today. The other set of studies were around physical mediumship that could be done in daylight settings. So apports, slate writing, transfiguration, and precipitated art. We can also do physiological studies looking at what's happening in the body when the medium is engaged in the process. And then also seance studies where we're actually in a light setting or dark setting with stringent controls, being able to study within the actual seance setting itself. Now, that last piece is much, much more challenging to do it in a stringent research way. And I thought, and I convinced Anna that it was a good idea to start with the phenomenological experiences as really a first step and a grounded foundation to do this work. So I'm going to share with you about an active study that we're doing now, and this is about the experiences of physical mediumship seance attendees. And the purpose of this study is to basically just collect their experiences. What did they witness? So the survey's done after the seance, and we ask them a number of questions about their kind of worldview going into the seance, what they experienced, and how they felt about it. And so this is our little ad about it. Obviously, you need to have attended a physical mediumship seance. The survey takes about 15 minutes. There's a question at the end asking if you are interested in having a follow-up interview to further describe your experiences, and Anna is wonderfully doing those interviews. And then each completed survey enters a raffle to win $250, and that's just a little incentive for people to actually do the surveys. So if you are an active attender of physical mediumship seances, we would love you to be engaged in this study. We have had mixed results collecting data in this way. I think there's many reasons for that, and we're kind of brainstorming and working around it. But one idea we had was to engage research sitters, so people who attend seances frequently, to be kind of our trusted sources in filling out these surveys after each one that they do. So that's just one idea. So that's active. We've collected a bunch of data we want to keep collecting, and that's just going to keep going in an ongoing way. Then we just received approval for another study, and this is specifically for home circles. And, the public seance is kind of a unique experience that has, people charge for it. There's always different people in the room. You don't know what their energy is going to be like. And so it's a bit of a mixed bag for the public seances. And so the home circles, we think, is a really wonderful idea in terms of getting a consistent group, a consistent seance group where, people know each other, they're building the energy, there's no, financial gain or notoriety associated with them. And it's a small group of people who are really committed to each other and committed to the development of the medium. So for this study, if you have a home circle, you're interested in participating, then one person would be the representative of your home circle, and you would agree through a consent form online. And then that representative would be the one who would engage with the researcher, who would then conduct interviews. If for whatever reason the representative leaves, then you could assign a new one. We're calling the interviewers essentially mentors, and maybe Anna can share a little bit more about who these mentors are going to be during our Q&A, but very compassionate, incredibly knowledgeable people who will work with the home circle representatives to collect this information through an online Zoom or telephone interview. And this will be a longitudinal study, meaning that, we could do this for a number of years, collecting this data from home circles and see how the development ensues. And we'll do that through updates. So we'll have interview updates every 3 to 6 months that are focused on changes in the environment, the protocol, and observations of the physical phenomenon. If you have a home circle, you're interested in this, please reach out. This is our research email. If you know Wendy or Anna, you can also let them know. And I know I went through this very, very quickly, and I did that on purpose so that we could have plenty of time for questions. So I just want to offer deep gratitude again to the Marco Morelli Foundation and all the other supporters of this IONS channeling research program work. There's a ton of information on our website. I also wrote a book on the science of channeling, which is a very accessible book about the IONS channeling research program, just to bring awareness to people around that. And I will now leave it open for questions.
Hi, Helané.
Hi, Daniel. Great to see you.
Likewise, Helané. Thank you for being here and presenting. I have two questions. I'm a huge aficionado of the skull experiment, and so impressed with what they were able to accomplish without any ectoplasm at all. Now, in your studies, how often does that happen, that there are manifestations and so on without ectoplasm?
So I have heard of that. I read the skull protocol. I understand that there are some groups that are using a similar protocol that are not using ectoplasm. We're really hoping to get some of those groups engaged with the home circle study. I have not witnessed any any public seances that are non-ectoplasm ones. But that may be much easier to try to do lighted settings because you don't have the danger and risk to the medium in the same way.
Thank you for your presentation, Helena. Very fascinating. Thank you for your work. I'm familiar with Bob Ginsberg and the Forever Family Foundation, and they test mediums and only certify mediums with 90% accuracy. And I'm wondering if you, through your brain research, have run across any of these mediums and tested them and found a significant correlation between what they can do and their brain activity.
Great question. Very familiar with Forever Family. We collaborated with them on a different study looking at how to the readiness for professionalization with mediums, and we're currently working on a study on ethical guidelines for professional mediums. We have done studies looking at brain waves and mental mediums and have found a specific brainwave when they are getting accurate information versus non-accurate information. So those studies were done by my team member, Arnaud Delorme, Delorme, and those papers are on our website. As of yet, I do not believe any physical mediums have been hooked up to EEG during a seance.
Thank you. It was a fabulous presentation, really fabulous. So I want to thank you on that. The question really relates to healing. with what you were talking about. How have you seen healing? It doesn't even have to be an entire healing, but a partial one. And the other thing is, your background as a naturopath kind of interests me. And I'm wondering if there's any, how would you say it? I'm going to say a marriage between naturopathy and healing and this whole topic.
So do you mean healing specifically with a physical mediumship or just channeling in general?
Just in terms of your experience, like you named so many different things. For example, when you were talking about different characteristics under the Noetic, I forget which, Noetic signature, and then you put in that healing. So that's what I'm really interested in.
Yes. So we have done a number of studies with energy medicine healers and intention experiments, and I envision healing as a subset of mind over matter or consciousness is effect on the physical world, because often there's a positive intention entailed in that. And so the most recent one was with Reiki masters, and we found numerous positive symptoms with that. We did a previous one with hand and wrist pain. There have been many studies outside of our lab looking at how intention positively affects cells in a petri dish, plants, animals, humans. The effects are small. It's like, 0.25 is the effect size, which is kind of on the smaller end, but the results are incredibly significant, and we can see it over and over again in these various studies. The last piece I'll say, kind of interesting to this group, we just finished analysis where we had 6 clairvoyant seers observing the Reiki sessions. So it was 40 Reiki sessions, and we had them write there what they were seeing, because we wanted to figure out, how does energy medicine work? How does the Reiki actually bring about healing? And in every single session, the clairvoyant seers talked about seeing a non-physical being, whether it was an angel or a guide or whatever, assisting the session and helping move the energy and shifting the energy, or whether it was a more negative entity that was part of the pathology, like an attachment or earthbound spirit or something like that. So we're getting ready to publish that paper. So that was a really fascinating study. I could go on and on about the healing stuff, but that's a little tidbit. Again, we have many, many papers on that topic.
I'd like to invite Inga to come on for a minute to talk a little bit about this non-ectoplasmic seances.
Hi, Helané. How are you going?
Good to
Well, you will find that studying the not heavily based ectoplasmic media seances will become much more common, as the spirit people use photoplasm, as they call it, the energy around the planet, the energy from the sitters, the energy from the medium's mind. They use that in seances with technology. A lot of groups now work on spirit phones, so not necessary that we can ring up the spirit world, but that they can leave us messages on the phone, on the computer. So for that, they will use photoplasm mainly, but photoplasm and ectoplasm have always, since the beginning of mediumship as such, they tell us it always has worked together, because the ectoplasm is very sensitive. So to have the ectoplasm in light, they coat it with photoplasm. And Helané, you might have felt the hand or something in a seance. That slimy bit, that is the photoplasm what breaks down, and it's yucky, isn't it? It feels a bit yucky, but that is the photoplasm. So all the time, they always have combined photoplasm and ectoplasm. When you have the ectoplasm more raw, like I had with Kai's once, where they put it on my head, it was scratchy, it was so dry, it was horrible. It was moving over my head, and all I wanted was touching this bloody ectoplasm. All I wanted to touch it and rip it off because it was so alive and it was just moving over my head, but it was very dry. And not long ago, I asked Abraham about this and said, oh my God, it was just not a pleasant experience. And he said, well, they did very little photoplasm and mostly ectoplasm. And that's what you felt. Does that do, Wendy?
Oh, Inga, tell us a little bit more about about what you've experienced with home circles. That's obviously something that Helané is very interested in. Are there many home circles that you're aware of?
There are many home circles. There are not necessarily many home circles who wish to go public or be known publicly. I just did a little talk in Albany about that because I asked 10 people I knew have running home circles, and then I asked some people who now quite public with their mediumship, and I asked them about their home circle and how they started, and many of them have changed. I think people don't really like the idea today to sit for a longer time. I think people go, well, nothing happened in 3 months. Let's change the sitters. Let's change the medium. Let's do this. And then the spirit people go, oh, wow, great. Now we start all over again. Great, good stuff. People don't really put in the time these days, but there are many successful, very successful home circles. It's just very hard to get them to speak about it. Especially also, you know, look how people are against physical mediums. So they really don't want to get into that area. And the spirit people say that always, for the last decade, has been their aim to get the mediums out of the public and back into home circles. They go, we need now, you want technology, work with technology. You want to know what's, you know, we giving messages with all this is all skills we need to learn. Like anyone else, we need to learn the skills. Home circle gives us the security, it gives us the stable harmony, it gives us the stable energy to practice. But many of these public mediums now have no home circle. Every phenomena developed is developed in public circles, in public sittings, you know, demonstrations. So it just is too hard, really. So we need home circles, but because home circles are concerned about the public, so it is hard to actually get home circle to open up.
Yeah.
And I know many people, and they still say, yeah, you know, no, but don't write our name. Don't say where we are. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I go, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I wonder if Anna, thank you, Inga. I wonder if Anna would be willing to share about the mentors of the home circle study.
We took this into consideration, the fact that home circles are very private. And I also, before proposing this pilot study, I talked with different people, and Wendy was one of the people I talked with. And Wendy stressed the fact that people need to be taught what to do in home circles. And so what we developed is a system where there's these home circles. We just have a pilot program. So this is the first time it'll be done. And we'll make changes as they become necessary. But the idea, what we have is one person who is highly skilled and has a home circle of their own will act as a mentor to other home circles that report to that mentor. So they're not reporting directly to the scientist. They are in a small group, a maximum of 8 circles, including the circle of the mentor. They can communicate with each other, and they don't have to give their name except for the the main person in the circle, the host or the medium or whoever is the leader in the circle. And other people will just give a first name and initial. So the privacy is completely protected. And then they will simply report to the mentor. And then all of this information will go to IONS, and it's completely anonymous, and data will be collected in this way. So the privacy, we're very concerned with maintaining the privacy so that people will feel comfortable in sharing their experiences. And the aim is to see how mediumship develops under these circumstances. So we hope people will participate. We already have people that are willing to participate in this pilot study. We expect the pilot study to run for 1 or 2 years, and then from that we'll spin off other home circles when we have a mentor that is knowledgeable and can do that.
Thanks, Anna. And this whole mentor person being the one to interface with the home circle, we're hoping will help reassure them. So they're never actually needing to engage with the scientist, and the information that IONS receives is totally anonymous.
Final question. I'm just wondering if your research will extend to, I guess, what you'd call a hybrid groups. I'm in a psychic circle, for instance, and we have a couple of mediums, and both, mediumistic phenomenon happens, or actually people, spirits coming through, as well as, intuitive insights. I'm just wondering if that would be an area of study as well.
Thank you. We don't have plans for that in the moment, but it's great to know that they're there. And if you stay connected, then if we do have a study like that, you can let us know, and perhaps your group will be involved. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Helané, thank you so much for coming. We do appreciate your work and the time that you've given, and we look forward to promoting anything that you want promoted. Please keep in touch.